Hi everyone, it's Adam Francis with Francis Construction Services, and today I've got a video for you about flipping this piece of furniture for a client. This is a client-owned piece, and it had some oil-based paint on it. But first off, a little piece of news for the channel, I guess, that I should address. I did change the name of the channel, but it doesn't have anything to do with the content of the channel. It's just for SEO purposes on Google. The advertising person for my business, Francis Construction, told me that I should change the name just to make everything consistent so that there wasn't any kind of confusion about, what was going on. And it would just probably help my website grow because I do have a business and I do, operate a company here in Baton Rouge. So I just kind of wanted to add the channel to the things that are kind of helping me grow my business. So basically, I have this client-owned piece, like I said, and they wanted to take the base off and do a different color paint, like a Repose gray, over this oil-based paint. So that's something that can be kind of difficult to do, but I'm going to show you how in this video. So before starting this piece, I cleaned it with degreaser and I also sanded all of the paint off that I could get off very easily. So if it wasn't really in an accessible area like a curve or a crevice or something like that, I just sanded it as aggressively as I could with the 150 grit. And if I could get it off, I did. So basically that was my kind of starting block, and then I sprayed that coat of 1111 Centurion primer over the oil-based paint. But I don't have the footage of me sanding it, but just know that that's what I did. So while I was sanding it, like I said, I'm making a new base. So I also made a base out of maple for this dresser, and I used a piece of like 1/4 inch maple plywood to skin the front just to cover up some of those large joints because it was 2-inch maple, so there was a really big gap. Not gap, but like basically a really big butt joint there. So I just wanted to cover that up. And I primed it and filled all of the gaps with 1111 just like I did for the furniture. And I also sanded it, and then I have this brass spray paint from Home Depot, and this is what I'm going to use. So what I found with spray paints, that if you want to mimic the metallic look, the hand motion of how you're spraying it is really important because you want to get an even metallic distribution in the spray paint can. So kind of like a side to side motion like I'm doing kind of allows you to better get an even distribution of the material, and it kind of makes it look more like metal. And also, you don't want it to be like super consistent because then it's not going to look like metal, it's going to look like paint. So yeah, that's just one thing that I've kind of noticed that's happened that I've seen. So this is my first coat, and I'm going to let it dry for a few hours, then I'll come back and sand it again. So since I've only sanded to 150, it's basically going to give me a very kind of, you're going to get a lot of raised grain and other kind of things like that, that maybe if you sanded to a finer grit, you probably wouldn't get. But it's just a consequence of, it's kind of a necessary thing you have to do. You need to get a good stick to the surface with the primer, and I think the best way to do that is, it's not, I don't really have any proof or any scientific evidence of this, but if you sand it to, a lower grit, I think it makes the surface a little bit more likely to absorb the primer versus if you sand to like a higher 220 or 240 or whatever. I think the primer is more likely just to kind of lay on top of the surface. So for oil-based paint, I do like to sand to a lower grit and then spray it, and then after that first coat, I'll come back here, and now I'm sanding with 180 and 220. But this is after my first coat of primer, and then I'm using the Crocodile paint prep wipes to clean all of the sanding dust off. Those are also a great hack. I just find that they're a lot better for cleaning than a microfiber because you're, kind of using a damp rag and making sure to pick up a lot more. So. So this is the drawer after the first coat of paint, and it's like a Repose gray color. It's kind of a custom color that they did, and I think it looks really good. I like it a lot, and so I sprayed 2 to 3 coats of this, I think. And I'm just gonna kind of let you watch the footage. There's really not much to say here. I just sanded in between coats with 180 to 220 each time, and then just kind of kept building up coats of the Centurion 1K. This is the 400 series, and the sheen flat. So it's a flat sheen if you're wondering how to kind of mimic this look. So I sanded the base after letting it dry, and I did a second coat of that paint, and it looked good. It definitely exceeded my expectations, I'll say that. And the client was happy with it. I sent her a picture of it, and so I moved on to continue working on the piece itself. So, to caulk or not to caulk, it's a huge debate, and I'm not going to really answer any questions about it or argue with anybody about it. But I'm doing it here, and it's a floating panel. The problem is that after a piece has been badly painted or caulked in the past, it's basically impossible to undo that. So, a little bit of caulk, kind of just to fix some of the areas that were bridging from the previous paint job, and you know, it's a small panel. It'll probably be okay. If something happens with it, I'll fix it. But there's just not much that you can realistically do. So even though I have the surf prep sander in between crevices and stuff like that, it's just easier to use like your hand and just take a surf prep pad and just kind of fold it up and do like I'm doing here. The reason is because you get an uneven pressure distribution if you try to use the sander in the corners. It just doesn't work very well. So you might notice for the final coat, I've got a light and I've got it on the ground. And that's because I need to be able to see very well. Whenever I'm spraying the final coat, I don't want any runs. I want this to be the last coat. And to do that, I want to make sure that I put the bare minimum amount of paint that I need to on to get a wet edge and keep a wet edge. But I don't want to pass that up and get heavy spots or runs or anything like that. So just a time saving tip, be sure to get a light. I like to shine it down up to see where I'm spraying at and to make sure that I keep my wet edge to where I'm not passing that up and, getting big overlaps where more than likely I'm going to get a run, especially with a product like Centurion. You know, if you're using a paint like an emerald urethane or some other kind of latex paint like that, there's a good chance that you won't get runs very easily. But if you're using Centurion or a 1K product, it's easy to get a run. So, just it can cost you a lot of time too. It's not insignificant for sure. So typically, I either spray the top first or last. It kind of just depends. And if I do spray it last, I'll build up the coat a little bit heavier on it to cover up any dried overspray. So this is the piece. The sheen is very consistent. The feel of the piece is great. It's really soft and smooth. The customer loved it, and I'm happy that everything went well with this. So thanks for watching.